Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Base Camp Wellbeing. Today, we're going to be looking at how to manage our wellbeing holistically in all areas of our life as we emerge and move through this disruption that we've all endured. And so, we've all had an opportunity to reflect on the way we do our life and to make adjustments. And so, Wayne and I are going to talk today about how we can manage our coping strategies, manage our well-being, look at how we think and how we act, and how we can improve our health as we move through this time and we move into a new normal. So, first of all, I guess it's really important for us to understand what happens to us and to perhaps revisit that concept of responsibility, our ability to respond. So, for all of us, things happen to us, and we are not defined. We don't need to be defined by those things that happen to us, but we can be mindful and prepare our response. If we're perceiving a threat, then sometimes we don't necessarily come from a place of making a response. We might be more likely to be reactive and have a more survival response. And we've spoken about this before, that um, what this does in the end is create a situation where we are avoiding dealing with the situation that we could learn from, and we end up by finding unhealthy ways of coping. And then there is the more flow response, or a place where we do take a responsibility. We exercise choice and we focus on where we can take action, and we adopt some healthy coping skills. So we have some examples of these sorts of things. Their healthy coping might be to express how we're feeling. That would be energy in motion. So express our sadness or our frustration in a way that's productive and healthy, moving our body, making sure we've got good nutrition, looking after our sleep, being mindful, maybe seeing where we can be creative and getting support from others or providing support for others. And there is on our website, there's a document there that's called 50 Ways to Happiness. You might like to have a browse at that and see if there's some things there, if you're stuck for ideas that you could use to cope with. Because sometimes we may not be aware of, we might have become very aware of in recent times, that there are coping strategies that may be less healthy for us. And some of those are listed on the right-hand side. And I guess some of the things that people tend to do more commonly when they're feeling under the pump is perhaps resort to drinking more alcohol, or binge watching things, or maybe comfort eating. They reckon we're all going to put a few pounds on. Maybe some people are doing a lot more exercise because they're trying to not get caught up on some of those unhealthy behaviours. There are things that we sometimes do that are less healthy choices, and we might be becoming aware of the fact that we can't do those things right now because of the limitations and restrictions placed on us. An example of that might be that sometimes people might go shopping to feel better, or to connect with others, or to feel less lonely, and some of those choices have been taken away. Or maybe go to the pub with your mates and enjoy a few rounds of pool and a few drinks, and that kind of opportunity has been taken away. So whilst there are both healthy and unhealthy ways of coping, there may have been some healthy ways of coping that for you have provided restrictions, and we need to find some new ways of doing that. And I think it would be really important for us to look at what are some other new ways that we can cope, or some other strategies that we can use. Again, some watching sport for some people has been taken away, and so they're looking for other ways to feel better. And this is really all a part of our kind of need to move into a flourishing space. And there are building blocks that we draw on in order to feel better. So a lot of the time when we're in fear, we come down to our survival needs. And this has been very real and still is very real for a lot of people at the moment. We are in the middle of May or beginning of May, and there are still people who are dealing with the survival needs of making sure they have income, and that they have the capacity to put food on the table. And we can't often feel like we can move beyond this until we've got those survival needs met. And that can create a feeling of fear within us. Once we have those needs met, then we start looking further afield. How can we connect with others? What's our sense of belonging? Who are the teams of people, or who is our tribe that we connect to? And so further on up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which basically along the side there is showing us that we're moving from looking after ourselves and making sure our needs are met to moving towards helping others as we grow and adapt to our new situation. I personally feel like this isn't a linear experience. It's something that is more of a cycle, and that there are times when we might feel more afraid and might drop down into a particular place or want to drop into really needing to know that we belong or that we're cared about, and then we can go out and help others. But at the same time, sometimes that is a way of finding out that we make a difference in the world, is to offer our time and see where we can be of service. And that can take us out of fear by understanding our connection with others. So whilst I think this is a really useful model, I think it's important not to think that we can't exist in many levels at one time, and that we can flourish at the same time as we're still taking care of our survival needs. So this is all part of looking at the wholeness of our being. Holistic well-being, as in this model, is really looking at what is our physical well-being, our physical state, our emotional state, our psychological or mental state, and our social or connectedness state. And the spiritual capacity of our well-being there is really pointing to that deep sense of who we are internally, and if we believe there's something beyond us, how connected are we to that part. So all of these areas of our well-being are related to each other. You only have to think about if you've ever had a relationship challenge, that can make you feel physically ill or emotionally unhappy. If your brain's not working properly and your thinking isn't right, that can affect your body as well. In fact, if I asked you to think about a lemon, slicing through a lemon and squeezing that, you probably would notice, as I ask you to do that, that there's a physical sensation starts to happen in your mouth and you start to salivate. The connection between our mind and our body is so fast and so you can't take them apart. So we need to see these things not as separate, but as part of a wholeness of who we are. So we're going to also visit today what are some of the things that we can do to help ourselves cope more effectively in a more healthy way. And this is a way of looking at that holistic well-being in coping strategies. So what are the things that we can do to feed our mind? Those things in the top left-hand corner. What are the things that, if we want to use our body to change how we're feeling, what are some of the things that we can do with our body? What are some of the things that we can do by connecting with others socially? There's a lot of Zoom meetings going on and Zoom cuppers. So there's some virtual ways to connect, but there's also things that we can do like writing letters, expressing gratitude to people that can connect us to those that we care about. And also thinking about our environment, our immediate environment, as well as the broader environment outside of our home. How are there ways that we can use our environment or shift our environment to enhance our well-being, to help our well-being to go up, to raise our well-being? So these are things that are all little things that we can do to improve our well-being. And it's really important right now that we pay attention to that, because these are the things that are going to help us to move for the long haul, to make sure that we are able to cope with this endurance event that we're in. So some of the other things that you can be aware of is whether there are some rituals that you can be present for in your own life. And even though we might have a shower every day, or we would hope that we have a shower every day, when have we been present for that shower? Have we just been thinking about our list of things to do? Or have we been actually present and going, wow, I can really feel this water. I'm really mindful of the fact and grateful for the fact that I have running water here. And what are some other things? Am I noticing the sunrise or the sunset? Are there tools that I can use to help myself feel connected to the truth of who I am, or feel connected to my world if I'm feeling isolated, by using some candles or essential oils or other tools that you might have, other meditations? So there are some ideas that can really help us to have a sense of well-being. So I'm just going to pass you back to Wayne to really help us to understand that we need to kind of treat this not so much like a sprint, but more of a marathon. And And if we're doing things in a marathon style, that we're not going to do them in a rapid way, we need to pay attention and look after ourselves along the way. Over to you, Wayne.
Thanks, Gabrielle. You may or may not know, we actually trade as three different businesses. We have True North Leadership, which is leadership and teams business, mostly with workplaces and businesses and organisations. We also have a Wellbeing business, which Gab does most of the work in, and that's really what our focus is today, is talking about wellbeing. But the other thing we do is adventure travel, and one of the places we go is to the Kokoda Trail. And I just wanted to show you a picture. I don't know whether you can see that. Kokoda Trail takes 9 days, so it is a bit more of a marathon than a sprint. And some people put Vaseline on their feet. Generally, their feet get quite blistery if they don't look after their feet. So this photo is really just emphasising that point, is that you really need to take care of your health if you're going to complete the journey. And the journey we're on at the moment is quite challenging, so our health has become even more important. So we ran a program some years ago which we called Living Balance, and the diagram on the right there was the model that we were using, which had 8 areas. You can see them there: purpose, knowing what your goals are and what your purpose is in life, what your mission is, having a vision for yourself, time and money, being able to manage those, activity or exercise, nutrition. Attitude is really more about the way you think and your sense of humour. Relaxation, we'd probably call that time out, renewal, mindfulness, and relationships, which could be your intimate relationships, family, or in the workplace, or in society in general. Today, though, we're going to combine some of those together, and we're going to use the wheel on the left. So I'd like you to think about, as we go through, how you would rate yourself for each of these areas of the wheel. So let's say there's a 0 in the centre and a 10 on the outside of each piece. Where would you be on that scale? Would you be closer to the middle, and perhaps that area is not so important to you, or you may not be satisfied with how you're managing that area of your life? Or it could be that you find that area of your life really important and you do everything you can to be really balanced in that area. So if you put a dot on that line from 0 to 10 for each area, what would your graph look like, or your profile, if you joined the dots? Would it be balanced, or would it be, all over the place? So it'd be interesting to do that exercise if you've got a sheet of paper there and you want to draw a circle, cut it into 6 pieces or 8 pieces. And we'll go through the sections together. So the first one we want to talk about is energy management. So 3 times a week for 20 minutes would be the minimum that you would need to be aerobically in good health. And some people say you need more than that. Generally what I try to do is get 5 half-hour workouts a week that I plan, and I might miss a couple because things always pop up. So at least I'll get 3. And if you add those 3 lots of 20 minutes together, it's actually 60 minutes out of, 168 hours in a week. So it's not a lot of time when you think about it. It's less than 1% of your time. And yet time seems to be the main excuse that people come up with. And one way you can get around the time issue is to actually pick activities that are incidental and that tie in with what you're doing during the day. So if you can combine fitness, fun, and relationships by being with your family and going for a bit of exercise, then you're actually doing a number of things at once. So one of the things we try to do is go for a walk together as a family with the dog, usually in the afternoon, sometimes in the morning. And so if you can build it into your day, that's a good thing. One of the other things you can do to manage your energy is to be eating well. For most of us, it's hard to maintain a perfect diet all of the time. So we've tried to keep it simple and just come up with a diagram, which you could see as a steering wheel, but it's more of a dinner plate, if you like. The water circle on the outside there really is referring to the fact that we all need about 1.5 litres to 2 litres of water a day for our body to function well. So that equates to about 6 to 8 standard cups of water. So that's probably the main thing we need. And then about 2/3, 1/3 rule 2/3 of your intake should be plant food and a whole variety of plant foods. On the left there, it says 10 types, which sounds like a lot, but if you have a couple of pieces of fruit, 3 or 4 veggies, some salad, and some cereal with different nuts and seeds in it with your breakfast, and then a few snacks, high energy snacks during the day, you'll easily get 10 types of plant food. High fibre, low glycemic index is good. And if you're not a vegetarian and you're having some animal sources of food, try to keep that in ratio to the plant about 1/3, 2/3. And fish is really good, and obviously low fat, lean meats are also good. But just make sure you keep it in the right proportions. A lot of Australians have the big steak on the plate and a little bit of veggie on the side. It really needs to be the other way around for you to be healthy. Breakfast breaks the fast. So having breakfast every day really is good for your intestinal tract, keeps things moving through. And in fact, there is an inverse relationship between how regular your food moves through your body and your risk of things like bowel cancer. So having regular meals is a good thing. Small regular meals, lots of variety, and foods that are going to give you your basic vitamins and minerals that you need. On the right there, we've got the good stuff, which is once or twice a week. Some people say you shouldn't have any of this, but really, realistically, a couple of alcoholic drinks a day is considered healthy as long as you have a couple of days off. So 2 days off grog, that's the 2 dogs there. Caffeine, try to keep that to about maximum of 3 a day if you can. And if you're drinking lots of caffeine, you need to be drinking lots of water because it is a diuretic. And if you're having animal sources, keep them low fat. So they're the general rules around simple, healthy eating. And another way to remember it is if it rots, eat lots. So things that aren't too processed. Dr. John Tickell, quite a well-known doctor in Australia who's done a lot of presentations around health, his motto is everything in moderation except for laughter, sex, vegetables, and fish. And if you don't have sex, you can use brown rice as a substitute. I'm going to hand back to Gab now to go through some stress-busting foods.
Thanks, Wayne. Yes, it's really important, I think, to remember that before we had medicines, we had food, and food was medicine. So that food was the original medicine that we used to help us to feel better. We still use food to help us to feel better, but we may not be aware of the medicinal properties of food. So in my work as a naturopath, one of the first things I look at with people, whatever their situation is, whatever they're showing up with, is what is going in their mouth and what is part of their nutritional plan. So it's really vital to understand that we can change our state of being by what we consume. It's not about the rules, it's about how do we feel while we're eating these foods. So there's a couple of lists here that I'm going to show you that are not long, and they're not the total list of things that you could use, but just a bit of a hint on some of the foods that can help us. So when we're feeling stressed, these are some of the foods that can actually increase the amount of relaxing hormones, decrease the amount of stress hormones, and help our body to have the ingredients it needs. A lot of the B vitamins get churned up when we're stressed, so we need to replace those. Having the right fatty acids in our body can really help our brain to work as well. So if we're having some of these foods, they can really make a difference to our capacity to manage stress and to not feel the effects of that stress. And also to remember the teas that we can drink as well, apart from coffee, that if we can use a herbal tea, we can really make a difference to how we feel. I use the Sleepy Time tea. It's a fantastic, that's a brand name, but you can get a tea that relaxes you, a relaxing tea. Find one that works. The Sleepy Time tea is fine for everybody, whether you're an adult or a child. It has no contraindications that I'm aware of. And so, if we can use something that helps us to have a good rhythm, to keep our body moving and to reduce the stress, all very useful things. The oils, the essential oils, this is not for ingesting. This is for either putting in a bath or for putting in a vaporizer. These oils are great ones to help us to relax. Lavender is a calming oil. Orange and citrus very relaxing oils too, but they also make us feel happier. So orange is the happy oil, and citrus can help us to feel clearer in the head. And then there are other foods that we can use that help us to support our brain function. So they've all got technical reasons why they're good for our brain to function, but generally speaking, a handful of blueberries, some yogurt, so Greek yogurt, nothing that's got too much sugar in it, eggs and fatty fish, and turmeric is really fantastic for our brain. Dark chocolate, broccoli, pumpkin seeds, they all have the phytofactors or the plant ingredients that our neurological system can utilize to keep creating the brain cells and repair the brain cells as they get damaged by stress that we're suffering at the time. And remembering to use teas, peppermint tea, green tea is really good for brain function, for clarity. Be careful with green tea because it does have caffeine in it, so you don't want to get too caught up having copious amounts of green tea. But knowing what teas work at the right time, peppermint's great for digestion. If you have too much peppermint tea, you might be too awake and not be able to go to sleep. So it's about balancing what you need at any given time. And again, peppermint oil is very refreshing and will wake you up. Remembering that our diet, and that word diet is not one of my favorite words, but what you eat is not the only thing in your diet. Your diet is what are you taking into your body? What are you watching? What are you listening to? What are you reading? It's kind of includes the social media impact. It includes the people you're hanging around. It includes the media you watch on TV. So be mindful of what you're exposing yourself to and allowing yourself to take in, not just physically, but in other ways as well. And that understand that is all going into you. So if it's possible to eat your food and be present for that food, it actually makes a difference to your capacity to digest that food. It helps your hormones and your digestive enzymes to be in the right place at the right time. For example, if you've anticipated your food and if you've been still enough to be present while you're starting to eat your food, the digestive enzymes are going to be ready to do their work, as opposed to working and eating and watching TV and listening to people or having an argument all at the same time. It's not conducive. So when we're under stress, our fight flight hormones actually take the energy away from digestion out to our extremities. And when we are calm, then those things that we need to digest our food come back to the center of our body. Our circulation is there. So it's really important to be calm while we're eating, as well as to be mindful of what we're eating at the same time. Energy management that we've just been talking about is going to be, while we're trying to get everything else done, if we can get our energy sorted, then we can cope with all the other things and we can build our resilience and make sure that we stay on purpose, all the other things that we're about to talk about. So be aware of what takes you off balance and what helps you to stay on balance. And we might revisit some of those foundations later on in this conversation. So it's really important for us to be aware, and that's where the mindfulness comes in, to be aware of what are some of the things that take us off balance and what are some of the things that bring us back to balance, and making sure that we've got those foundation stones in place. Energy being one of those really important foundation stones, and then thinking about what are we going to do with our time and our energy and our resources, really, how are we going to use those. So that's why the next piece of our wheel of health, if you like, is looking at how do we prioritize, how do we focus manage. We've all got the same amount of time in our day, in our week. It's some people get a lot done, some people get less done. This is not about judgment, it's about, with the time that I have, am I getting the things done that I think are important for me? Or am I doing a whole lot of things that aren't necessarily my really big, key, important, big rock things, and not getting the things that are important to me done? And one of those is self-care. And as we go through this next piece, I really like you to think about, apart from the things that I know that are important to do in the world, where does my self-care come in? Because if I don't do that, again, my energy management is down. And so I can't do the things that I need to get done. Or if I do, then I may not be well at the time I finish them. This time energy priority matrix is adapted from Stephen Covey's work on the 7 habits of highly effective people. And what we're using this for today is to help us to think about, how do I manage that number of hours that everybody has and make sure that I get the things done that I need to, which are your A priorities, that are both urgent and important? How do I manage the things down the bottom in pink, which are the things that are kind of less important, but they seem to come into my life? How do I make sure that I eliminate the things on the bottom right hand side, which are the things that I get hooked into that are neither urgent nor important, so that I have more time up in the top right hand side to put into the maintenance part of my life, which is where the self care comes in. It's not urgent until we get sick, but it is actually a really, really highly important part of our well-being, is to take care of the maintenance side, not just of ourselves, but of our relationships, of our finances, all kinds of areas. And it's a very easy area to put off. And quite often it gets put off because of the emergencies, if you like, down the bottom left-hand side. So when those emergencies happen, there are four things we can do with them. We can deal with them straight away. We can put them off, defer them or delay them. We can delegate them to someone else, or we can ignore them altogether and delete them. So there's four ways of looking at how we deal with the distractions or the curveballs that come into our life. One of the things that we can do as well, if you think about it, is go to that top right-hand corner and go, can I plan enough buffer time so that everything's not squashed right up against each other, and I can handle those emergencies or some of those distractions more easily and with a better sense of mindfulness, without getting reactivated by them, so that I'm able to respond and make a decision to do one of the 4Ds. Because sometimes we can unconsciously get caught up in those distractions, without thinking about it, without being conscious, without being mindful. So in that top right-hand side is where we do our planning, and it's where we plan how we're going to use our time. And it's really, really important that if we want to change something about the way we live, that we address our life by looking at this matrix and have a look at where are the parts of my life where I'm wasting time that I could use that time more productively. Can I plan my shopping? Can I get one shopping list and use that over and over again, rather than have to keep generating a shopping list and have that cognitive load? What can I do that could be just rinse and repeat, that I don't have to keep putting creative energy zapping brain power into? And how can I eliminate some of the distractions? So that's just one way of looking at energy management, time management, priority management. It is really important for us to know what actually matters to me right now. So that's why having a sense of purpose and having a sense of what our priorities are is really important when we go to managing our time.
Thanks, Gab. A few weeks ago, if you've seen any of our other webinars, we talked about the fact that everyone was starting to work from home, and some people had quite a challenge with that, about how to organise the space within which they were working, how to structure their day, how to have time for their kids, their relationships, their health. So we put together a poster, and this was based on some information that was shared from other organisations and also from discussions with some of our own clients and some of our own background experience, because we've been working from home for about 20 years now. So the first one is really all the tasky stuff that you need to do when you're working from home. The environment within which you're working is so important. So to have a fairly uncluttered area, fairly organised, so that you don't cognitively get overloaded by all of the stuff that's sitting around you, which happens to me when I get really busy. I have a whiteboard, which you can't really see behind us, but it has stuff all over it. And then I've got folders on the desk, which are floating around with different projects I'm working on. And when it's disorganised like that, it really challenges me mentally and it really overwhelms me. But if I take all the clutter off my desktop on my computer, file things away, what I call Zen the room, I feel much better. So having an uncluttered and organised workspace is really important. If you've got an outside view of nature or the garden, that's really helpful. Being a calm environment that energises you rather than saps your energy when you move into the room. So minimising your distractions. One of the key things is to structure your day so that you have a scheduled start and finish time and blocks of time for various things such as self-care, planning and prioritising, maybe some time for reflection, times during the day when you're going to be communicating. That's another trap for me, is if I go straight to my email, that can take me down a rabbit hole for a couple of hours. So I need to have certain times of the day that I check email and tell people that's what I'm doing, so they're not expecting a response straight away. Some people actually have little messages on their signature which say, I will be checking my emails at this time and this time and I'll get back to you. Or they make phone calls at a specific time of the day. Having lots of rest and energising breaks is good, and an end of day ritual such as walking the dog, 5 o'clock drinks, a meditation, a walk at the beach, whatever it is for you. And then setting yourself up so that you can focus, setting clear boundaries around work, family, self-care time, avoiding distractions and trying to stick to your priorities. So using that matrix that Gab talked about is a kind of a roadmap for you, which may need to change if there's some roadwork somewhere, but generally it will help you to stay on track. Turning off notifications on all of your devices so that you're not constantly being interrupted during the day, and maybe have some times where you turn your phone off as well. And of course, getting hydration, snacks, movement and stretch breaks, and using your most productive time of the day for the harder tasks. So for me, usually I'm much more productive sort of after lunch, not straight after lunch. Sometimes I'll have a siesta, but generally around 2 to 4 o'clock is when I know that I'm most productive. So I'll generally try to do tasks that I know take a bit of brain power to do that in the afternoon. The next part of the poster, which you can get at our base camp wellbeing site, is the more people side of the equation. And this is a bit of an enlargement of that. So you've got your self-care, which we've talked a lot about already, making sure that you've got some exercise, hydration, your nutritious meals planned, a bit of time for mindfulness and rest, minimising the amount of media input that you have certain times of the day. And then making sure you've got time for connection with family and with people at work. So you might need to schedule that and just be mindful that you're not just head down working the whole time without time for the people priorities. So it's really a question of balance, and the best way to do that is to plan your day and to be really disciplined around the boundaries that you set. So hopefully that poster is helpful to you, and it really comes down to what's important to you. So purpose and understanding what your purpose is really important. Some people say that life has no meaning. I mean, the meaning that which we give it. So this image is a good example of that. If you look at that picture, some of you may have seen it before, you may see a young lady or an old lady. Just have a think about which one you can see. You may be able to see both. If you see the old lady, you'll notice her big chin here, very thin mouth, lip line, and then above the mouth, big nose, and her eyes here. So she's looking down this way, an old lady. The young lady is looking the other way. This is her neckline. She's got a choker necklace on, a chin here. Her nose you can just see because she's looking that way. This is her ear, and she's facing the other way. So that's the young lady and the old lady's chin, nose and eye. Now that I've shown you, you probably see both. And so what we see is really dependent on what we project onto our life and the meaning of events. And so that's one of the things that you can do if you're overwhelmed with what's happening, is to reframe or project a different meaning onto what's happening to you. A good example of this is a few years ago when I was on the Kokoda Trail, I saw a little boy who had one shoe, and he was under a hut, and he was carrying this shoe around, and every now and again he'd put it on and he'd hop around on this one shoe. And some of the people who were with me, some of the trekkers who we'd taken across the track, were saying, oh, the poor little kid, he's only got one shoe. And then other people were saying, oh, he's the lucky one because none of the other kids have shoes. So it was kind of dependent on how you look at it. If you understand the symbols for crisis in the Chinese symbolic language, there's two symbols. One means danger and the other means opportunity. And there's the story of a couple of shoe salesmen who went to Africa, which demonstrates this. And one of the shoe salesmen rings up his head office in Sydney and says, "It's no good here, I'm coming home. There's no market for shoes, no one wears shoes." So he was really despondent and decided that he was going to take the next plane out. Another salesman, the other one who went, he rang up head office really excited, totally opposite to the other guy, and said, "This is awesome here. There's so many people who don't wear shoes. There's such a huge market for shoes." So his perception was that it was an opportunity. The other guy's perception was that there was no opportunity there. So it really depends on how you look at things. And if you look at circus elephants back in the 50s and 60s, you could go to a circus and see a full-grown bull elephant outside of a circus tent. And the way they train the circus elephants is when they're small, they put a steel shackle around their leg. And as the elephant tries to get away, it feels the shackle and the chain, which is concreted into the ground. So it hurts and it stops at the end of the chain, knowing that if it goes any further, there's going to be a lot of pain. Then as the elephant grows older, they can replace that chain with a rope around its leg. And you can see a full-grown bull elephant standing outside a circus tent, and it will walk a certain distance and then stop. And the reason it does that is because it's conditioned to think that its life ends at the end of the rope. And if you think about it, human beings are very much like this. We all have these invisible ropes around our leg that, tell us we can only earn this much money, we can only deal with this amount of stress, we can only relate to these kind of people. So we all have these invisible ropes that are conditioned into us based on our past experience. A lot of the limits we put on ourselves are actually self-imposed limits. And that's one of the things we like to challenge when we take people on journeys to different parts of the world, is to see that the limits that they think they have, they don't actually have. So when we see people cross the finish line at the end of the Dakota track, you see people in tears or big smiles on their faces, realising that they've actually busted their self-imposed limits. And so adventure and challenge is a good way of exposing this truth. The other thing I'd like to mention with regard to purpose and meaning is that it's really quite a personal thing, and it's a good idea to take some time out occasionally to reflect on, where you're heading in life. Are you happy with the direction you're going in? And what really does give your life meaning, which probably comes back a lot to your personal values. So mindfulness can be another way of tapping into that. So I'm going to hand back to Gab now to talk a little bit about mindfulness.
Thanks, Wayne. So if I think of mindfulness and I think of living mindfully, what I'm thinking of is, how do I be conscious in each moment of each day? How do I be present? If we want to look at a definition of mindfulness, one definition is that it's simply about being aware of the present time without judgment and without wishing it were otherwise. Another description that I've heard, which I really like, is mindfulness is using one of the senses to be aware of the senses. So it's like we're using our ears and our eyes and our nose and our taste and our hands, our touch. How are we being present for what we're experiencing in our life right now? So mindful living is really about being aware and being present, and almost being aware in the way that we can be an observer in our own life, an observer of what we're saying, an observer of how we're doing life. And the capacity to observe, almost to go up into the grandstand and look back down at our life and go, how am I doing my life? That capacity to reflect is actually one of the things that sets us apart as human beings, apart from animals or other creatures that potentially, not that we are aware of, don't do the reflection that we're capable of doing. So this capacity to live mindfully is really one of the great gifts of being human, and it's one of the things that we are doing more and more of as a species, and learning about what's beneficial about doing that. So one of the tools we can use is, one of the models we can use as we're being mindful, is to reflect on the iceberg model, which really is a way of representing that what we see up the top of an iceberg, the things that we see floating above the water level, if you like, which is our quality of life or our health, our well-being as the world sees it, is informed by other things that are underneath. So in the water, if you are in the water with an iceberg, there are things underneath the water that you can't see, but that do affect what the iceberg looks like on top. And so a lot of times people want to change something in their life, like, oh, I need to exercise more, I need to eat better, I need to not be so stressed. And they're looking at that very top part of their iceberg, and they'll go, oh, well, I just won't eat this, I just won't eat chocolate. And they're not thinking about why they eat the chocolate. They're not thinking about how they can set themselves up so that they make different choices. They're just trying not to eat the chocolate. And if we're doing that, what we're doing is ignoring the wealth of information that's underneath the surface. So, looking at the things down below the surface, if you like, we can look at how are our behaviours giving us the quality of life that we have. How are our thoughts and our feelings affecting our emotions and our behaviours that are giving us the quality of life that we have? How are the values that we hold, our beliefs, our underlying beliefs, giving us the things at the top? Because they all affect each other along the chain. And you can run that horizontally or you can run that vertically, whichever way you go. There's one thing that leads to another, which leads to another. So if we are mindfully aware of our inner rules, our values, the strengths that we bring, as well as some of the less useful beliefs that we might hold that we might not be aware of, but we can become aware of those, then we can understand why we live the way we do. And it gives us power. It gives us power to unpack them and to perhaps choose different thoughts or choose different responses or choose different behaviours, so that we don't have to have a automatic fixed response to the way life is at the time. So living mindfully is about understanding what are the foundation stones that I have in my life and how can I balance those. It's about asking ourselves perhaps the next lot of questions, which is, what really matters to me? What are some of the thoughts that get in the way or that help me? And where are my areas for improvement? I can look at my current state of being and going, what's working? What's not working? So it's not just about looking at it from what we might call a negative perspective of what are the things that are wrong. It's also what are the things that strengthen me. So what strengthens my capacity to respond better to life? Or what are some of the really good values that I have brought through or that I live by? And how can I live more aligned with those values more frequently? Or what are some of the strengths, my skill set when it comes to thinking? What are some of the things that work really well for me so that I can use my thoughts in a productive way so that my behaviors are the way that I want them to be? So it's really, really useful to take some time and look at some of those things. And that's one of the things that both Wayne and I love doing with people, is to help them to get the life they're looking for by helping them to become aware of or mindful of or conscious of those things that are underneath the surface that are going to be able to help them to get the life that I'm looking for if they have become conscious of them and make the changes that they want to make. So it's important to be aware and to be present and to have our outer life reflecting our inner life. So the next slide is really looking at, does my internal world and my external world match each other? So while I'm doing my exercise, which is the above the top of the iceberg stuff, are the thoughts underneath? Have I got self-judgment going on? Have I got confusion? Have I got unhealthy thinking happening so that my actions, whilst they might be really useful, are not necessarily being supported by my thinking? And there's a subject or a topic called metacognition, which is thinking about our thinking without doing ourselves in and going on a downward spiral, having an understanding of how we think. The metacognition is really, really useful because that can help us to be really present, and being really present can help us to understand how we think. So living mindfully is finding that place of peace within us. It's finding that place of acceptance and non-judgment, and that can take some practice. It's not necessarily an automatic thing. So the first thing that we can do is use our breath. And we've spoken about this in our previous webinars with you, and that is to use our breath to bring about that state of peace, that we're creating a space between a stimulus or what's happening to us and our response. And so that rather than just reacting, we're creating a space or a gap so that we're not fueled or we're not reacting to our amygdala. We're not dealing with an amygdala hijack and allowing ourselves to be completely flipped by that. to flip our lid, we're actually creating a space to collect our thoughts and make a choice about how we respond. That's what mindfulness is about, and that's why we practice mindfulness. So we can do that right now by taking a breath. And if you want to, you can close your eyes. If not, that's fine too. Just allow your eyes to close and allow your body to be supported on the seat if you're sitting, and become aware of what you can sense. So we're using the sense of hearing. You may be able to hear traffic or other voices, birds, my voice. Become aware of the breath moving in and out of the body. Notice the temperature of that breath as it moves in and out. And just feel the sensation of that breath. And now gently allow your eyes to open. What we've done in that moment, and probably 30 seconds, not even a minute, is simply allowed our mind to come to rest by bringing our awareness to present time, which is what we can hear, what we can sense, to bring our awareness to the breath. And in doing so, we've switched our body into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest part of the nervous system. And that is really, really key in terms of mindfulness. It is the best tool that we have, is to be present and to make good choices from where we are being present. One of the other things to be really aware of is how we get, and whether we get enough sleep or not. And so just really briefly wanted to go through some useful tips around sleep hygiene. And one of the first things that we can do if we're having a challenge to get enough sleep or to create a good night's sleep is to create a routine prior to bed. So about an hour before bed, we start training our bodies, entraining them, if you like, that we are going to bed. So they might include things like a bath or a shower or herbal tea, dimming the lights, so not having really bright lights because that switches the melatonin levels back off again, and we need them to be there for good sleep. Having device-free time. So it's about working through some of these procedures that are on this list. I'm not going to go through them really in detail, but think about what are the things that you can do off that list that will help you to get yourself ready for sleep and have a better quality sleep when you get into bed. One of the things that's really important, I think, is not to watch the clock if you're having a challenge sleeping. As somebody who has dealt with insomnia in my life, particularly earlier in my life, I found that if I was conscious and aware of the fact that I hadn't slept for another hour and yet another hour, that actually made me more anxious, which made me less likely to sleep. So it's really important to try not to clock watch, and to at least allow your body to rest. It is good to have some routines that you can do, some mindfulness routines or some meditation. There's lots of great apps, and if you would like to get some information on that, I'm more than willing to help you with that. So just get in touch with us through the website or by email, and I'll be happy to give you some assistance with that, because having that good quality sleep helps us to manage the stress of life or to not be triggered by the stressors of life, and it helps to build our resilience. And that's the bit we're going to have a look at now, is how do we make sure that our resilience is balanced and well fed. Okay, over to you, Wayne.
Resilience means different things to different people. For me, it's a bit like a tree. A tree with strong roots. A mature tree will blow in the wind, but it won't break. It'll bounce back up again, and it actually gets strengthened by the challenging winds and the environment around it. So if you think of people who are quite resilient, generally most of them have had some quite significant challenges in their life, and that's actually helped them to develop a greater resilience. So you could say it's the ability to bounce back, it's your agility, your strength, your flexible strength. And whether we have that or not depends a lot on our conditioning and sometimes on our personality traits. but usually our experiences in life will help us. And we can also do some consciously proactive things to build our resilience. So maintaining a dynamic balance and an agility, which is founded on strength and flexibility and mindfulness, as you would see in people who are quite good at the martial arts, for example. They have really good balance and strength and are not easily pushed over if they're in a strong stance. The other thing is that it's about your, not just your physical capability, but your mental capability. So you can see in the two pictures here, we've got two different people. They're both doing the same activity. This one here is internal life is not particularly quiet and calm and still and balanced, compared with this person over here who's doing exactly the same thing physically, but mentally is in a different headspace. So I think that goes a long way to giving you some idea of what we mean by resilience. It's not just a physical strength, it's founded on an internal strength. And inner peace is easy to acquire when you're on holidays or down at the beach on a nice morning or in a cave somewhere if you're meditating as a monk. The key is, can you maintain that or tap into that inner peace when there's a lot of noise and trouble and challenge around you? And so for people who are going through the COVID-19 crisis, some people are doing that in a graceful way, I guess, and other people are getting really freaked out about it. So it's this inner peace that really makes a difference to your resilience. This was a picture of some people, including myself in the middle there, from about 25 years ago, when we decided, after I'd seen Patch Adams, the doctor who first started the idea of clowning in a medical setting, I saw him and I was inspired, and we were going to a conference in Brisbane. It was back in the days when you couldn't afford airfares. So we had a bus of, I think it was about 40 or 50 people. And we said the ticket to get on the bus is you have to dress up as a clown. And it was amazing how much fun we had over the 2 or 3 days. And people's attitudes were just quite different. It was a really, really fun trip. It reminded me of the power of humour in our mental state and how that can make what would otherwise be a challenging trip in a bus for 3 days. We actually had a ball. I also learned a lot about the power of humour from my father, who was in the army for 25 years. And he was a sergeant major type, but had a very good sense of humour, as a lot of military people do, or people in, say, the ambulance service, police, those type of people. They have very challenging circumstances to deal with, but they always have an attitude of humour about it. When I was 16, I had long hair down to my shoulders, and I just got my licence, and I said to Dad, can I have the keys to the car to go down to the shops? Because when you get your licence for the first time, you're always wanting to go for a drive, whatever opportunity you get. And he didn't like my long hair, so he said, look, if you get your hair cut, I'll let you have the keys to the car anytime you like. And I said, hang on, Dad, that's not fair. Jesus had long hair, and it was good enough for him. And he said, yeah, and he walked everywhere he went too. So he was always able to come up with some sort of pun or humorous angle on things, even though he had a sort of a gruff exterior at times. He also had a very good sense of humour underneath that. So for me, I learned a lot of lessons about the power of humour from my father, and also working with the ambulance service and police call centres and things like that over the years. I've learned the power of having a good sense of humour. There was these bunch of kids in PNG, and I'd always thought about how little they had and the circumstances of their lives, and thought to myself, could I be as happy as them if I lived in the same situation? And it's really amazing how often they smile, considering they have a pretty tough life. So often people say to me, if you're having fun, why don't you inform your face? Because I've got a serious look on my face most of the time. So that's one of the things I've had to learn, is to smile more and to realise that joy is not in things, it's in the people that are living a life in all sorts of circumstances but are still able to find that joy. So now we're going to look at relationships, and this is an interesting topic because we can talk about relationships in terms of our intimate relationships and relationships with family and friends. And we're also going to look at in our next webinar how this broadens out to our relationships in the workplace. But to start with today, if you look at the wellness continuum, There's high-level wellness at one end, illness and death at the other end, and most of us are doing okay. And if we can also overlay this on organisational health or the health of our relationships. So relationships that are not doing so well would be quite dysfunctional, a lot of codependence where each person is really affected by the other person they're in relationship with and can't really exist independently. There's generally a negative atmosphere in their relationship, lots of blaming and not taking responsibility, uh, lots of disrespect, discouragement. One person's trying to undermine the other. They may be insensitive and also either passive or aggressive or both. Most of us know what those kind of relationships look like. And if you think about it, our health does fluctuate from feeling well to sometimes feeling sick. So we're not saying that you are going to be able to avoid these states when you're under pressure or things are not going so well on a particular day. But we want to be up this end of the spectrum most of the time in order to enjoy our relationships and have a healthy, functional relationship. So relationships that are doing well up this end are mutually fulfilling. There's some interdependence where people can be autonomous and free to be who they are in relationship with the other person. More positive atmosphere, people taking responsibility when they need to, more respect, encouragement, support, empathy for each other, and assertive communication when required. So how do we get to that end? Well, one of the things that gets in the way is that we often have a different perspective on life or we see things in different ways. So how well we communicate our reality to the other person can really help to avoid misunderstandings. So there's a triangle model that we use often when we're talking with teams or couples in relationships or dealing with difficult people workshops. And it's called the ARC triangle or the understanding triangle. So you've got affinity at the top here, which is the rapport between two people or the level of trust and connection. The higher that is, the more likely it is that people will get along. We each have a different reality or point of view, or we might have different values or expectations around whatever is happening between us. And then in terms of building affinity and clarifying our reality with each other, coming to some mutual understanding, communication is the key. And this is the key piece where our skills come in, questioning our ability to listen and clarify and confirm our understanding with each other really helps to avoid misunderstandings around reality that might be different from the way we see the world. And so that contributes to our understanding and builds our affinity. So if any of these things are missing, it really causes a lot of challenges. And if you think about this as a cup and that cup falls over, there's lots of challenging feelings that come out of there, such as frustration or anger or disappointment, sadness, jealousy, resentment, bitterness, all those kinds of things. So to avoid that, mend that when it's not looking so well, we need to work on building affinity. What do we need to do to build trust and rapport with this person to reconnect with them? And you can think about this in terms of customer service as well. And the other one is, what sort of questions do we need to ask to seek to understand the other person's point of view so we can get on the same page? And do we need to ask more questions, listen more, clarify? So if we have any of these kinds of yucky feelings here, it's usually one of these three things, if not all three of them, that we need to work on to rebuild that rapport in the relationship. So if we look at what are the challenges in relationships that get in the way of our understanding, one of them is our temperament. So I'm going to ask Ab to come back now and talk about personality types and how that affects our ability to understand each other.
Thanks, Wayne. Yeah, it's really interesting. I was reflecting on the iceberg model as Wayne was talking about the ARC model he was just chatting about then, and reflecting on how our level of trust in other people, which is the affinity section, our ability to see things from another's perspective and our ability to communicate is also affected by the things at the bottom of the iceberg. And so when we are just trying to apply one theory by itself or one model by itself, it's important to have a couple of the others behind us as well, and not to see just one thing as a solution point. And in a similar way, that looking at our personality style is is really another piece in the puzzle. It's not the whole picture. It's how we present ourselves most commonly in the world in a particular context. So we might have a particular personality style that shows up more frequently when we are around the people we're comfortable with, and a slightly different one that shows up when we are in a workplace environment. So when I speak now about personality styles and how we respond to change, bear that all in mind. You know, it's contextual, it can change, and it can also change according to how much confidence we're feeling at a given time, or how comfortable we're feeling with the people that we're interacting with. Human beings are wired to connect, and so really this is about how do we all bump into each other, how does who I am affect who you are, and how can we be our best selves. You know, how can I be the essence, my authentic self? How can Wayne be his authentic self? How can any of us be our most authentic self at any given moment? And if we are able to do that, then it really helps us to bring the best of who we are and improves our workplace or our family life, or whatever context we're bringing that to, even when we're going down the street or whatever it is. So it's interesting. I was coaching somebody this morning, and she was saying that actually she's really excited about how things are because she's a more reserved personality style, and she said, I'm actually feeling anxious about when we are all set free again, and I'm actually preferring to be in this environment, working from home, being productive, talking to people when I need to. So, and other people are like, can't wait to get back and connect with everybody again and find out how everybody's going. So it's interesting how we're responding to the current situation is affected by our kind of default personality style, and whether we're somebody who's perhaps more reserved or more outgoing and expressive. The other thing that will affect it is whether we're more likely to be somebody who's more focused on getting the tasks done, or more focused on the people and the connections. So the people that are most challenged at the moment are possibly the people in the right-hand side of this quadrant that we've called the monkeys and the koalas. And the people that are perhaps less challenged at the moment may be the people who are what we would call the rhinos and the beavers, because they're able to keep going with their tasks and keep driving things forward and keep tidying up the loose ends. So it's interesting how we will all deal with crises in a different way. So the people, in summary, that are outlined on here as a generalization, people who are more outgoing and more task-based people in a relationship tend to be the people that are sort of more decisive and determined and directive in their approach. Sometimes they can be so decisive that it seems really clear that they know where we need to go next and how we're going to get there. And sometimes that can mean that they appear to ignore all the people around them that might have different opinions. So there are both strengths in our personality style, and there's also challenges. So when we're responding to change, those people will tend to go, right, I'm just going to go and do this. And that's really straightforward for them and really easy. The people who are on the outgoing people side, that we would call the monkeys in this scenario, how they manage crises and how they manage change, often they are really happy to change things. They like things when they change. They like new ideas and innovations and creativity, and they tend to get a little bit stifled and de-energized when there's not enough change. So the change or the crisis can be really fantastic for them. The challenge can be that they, at the very moment, they might be feeling a little bit challenged by not having enough people to interact with, because they might be stuck with the same people all the time, or not feeling like they can go out and connect with enough people to get enough dynamism in their life. So how we need to be with those people is to see if we can create some fun, to play some games, to do things, to mix things up a bit and not let them get the same old, same old. Sometimes that can be a problem because it doesn't respect the fact that people on the opposite side of the quadrant might need some downtime, because the people on the top right-hand side might be people that don't necessarily do silence very well, and the people on the bottom left-hand side might be people that would prefer a bit of quiet time and silence. So let's go and deal with those people down there that we've got in the task reserved quadrant, which we would call the beavers. And right now, how they were dealing with change is that they quite often need information. They quite often need reassurance by way of data and information. And they're the kind of people that will wait for the updates each day and really appreciate getting the updates as they are released each day, each afternoon, the data on what the numbers are looking like, and they will be more comforted by that information, and that is important to them. And they tend not to adapt as quickly, but they do adapt well when they have the information that they need. And so this can sometimes seem a bit slow for some of the people in the top parts of the quadrant who might feel like they want to make a quicker decision or get on with things or change things, whereas other people who are more analytical down the bottom left-hand side might just need a little longer to make their decisions and to consider all the things that they like to consider, which is not dissimilar to the ones on the right-hand side at the bottom, the koalas, except for what they're considering is, how does this affect all the people around me? The koalas are very sensitive and empathic people, and their strength is in having an understanding of what people need. And so for them, they'll be very tuned in at the moment to the fact that not everybody's getting what they need, that some people are really challenged by this situation we find ourselves in, and that will potentially distract them from making progress if they have tasks to do, because for them the priority is making sure that everybody's okay and that there's some sense of harmony around them, and that they will find it very challenging potentially to move forward if they don't know that people are okay, or they don't get that reassurance. And so sometimes they can be at loggerheads with the ones on the top left hand side, the rhinos, who just want to get stuff done. Most commonly the conflict can happen across the diagonals, because we can usually find some point of commonality with the people either side of us on that circular quadrant model, if you like. And so it's about, what does that person opposite me need from me? How can I find a place to find common ground with them? How can I respect who they are whilst expressing what I need? And I think that's where that ARC triangle comes into its own, because we all want to get along. It's about understanding each other's perspective and being willing to communicate in a way that that other person will understand, and being able to step into their shoes and looking at their reality, because each of those quadrants of people has a priority that is most important to them. So for the rhinos, for example, it's about achieving and getting some decisions making, being able to make progress. For the beavers, it's about accuracy and making sure that the details are taken care of and the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and prudence is taken care of. For the koalas, it's about making sure everyone's okay. And for the monkeys, it's about making sure we're having a good time while we're doing this. And so they'll be doing the dance parties and the online parties and those kinds of things. So it's just about understanding what each other needs, because we need all of it. It would be a boring world if we just had one kind. Wouldn't that be true, Wayne? So the other way of understanding what we need in a relationship is also to look at what are the ways that we connect with each other. You know, what's the way that I show you that I care, and what's the way that you show me that you care. And at the moment, some of us have felt a bit challenged in this, when we can't be physically connected with people, but we might need to find other ways of connecting with people. And the 5 love languages, or the 5 languages of appreciation, is one of the models that can help us to get our heads around making sure we let others know that we care about them. With Mother's Day coming up, it's kind of a topical thing. You know, what is the way that we can show those people that we care about them, that we do care about them? So for some, it'll be acts of service. Acts of service are things like making somebody a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, doing something for them to save them doing that task, doing something that is actually not expecting anything in return. I'm not doing this for you to validate me. I'm doing this because I care about you. So taking a task out of someone's hands that they could do, or just presenting them with something that you've done without being asked to do that. This is probably the most challenging one for people at the moment, if they're living in a more isolated scenario, is not being able to reach out and give each other a hug, or to shake each other's hands, or letting each other know that we're connected through the physical modes. So we might need to adapt, and when we can get massages again, be able to go and get those massages. I think it'll be interesting to see how people emerge from this. People have done other ways of demonstrating physical touch at the moment, though. They have managed to make rugs, or send virtual hugs, or doing things in a creative way. But if physical touch is our love language, we tend to be somebody that likes to have the hugs. We like to make sure that we can connect physically. Words of affirmation is really important for some people. So that's about letting people know that we appreciate them, giving them a well done for the things that they have produced, the effort that they've gone to, the contributions that they're making, validating their presence, validating their contributions publicly. And so for those people, if we criticize them, they will take that way stronger than for somebody in another category on this model, if you like. So words of affirmation, writing cards, expressing our gratitude, really important to do that verbally, important to do that in written form as well. Gifts is another one, another really important, is probably one of my higher love languages. And sometimes this one can be misunderstood because it's not necessarily that I want the big house and the big car. It's not about the value of the material thing. It's about somebody perhaps picking up a shell or a flower and going, I thought of you and I saw this and it reminded me of you, and here it is. So a gift is not necessarily, it's not about the monetary value. It's about giving someone a present that reminds you of them and is letting them know that you care. And the last one, but not the least, is quality time. So how are we spending that uninterrupted, undistracted time with somebody? If that's a really important love language or language of appreciation for somebody, they will just enjoy being present with you. They won't necessarily want you to do anything with them. It's about being together and maybe doing something alongside each other or just hanging out together. So if one of those is strong for you, be aware of that. Again, be mindful of the ones that are higher up your scale and lower down, and maybe the ones that are higher up for your partner or for your children or for your colleagues at work, and see if you can give them that validation that we all long for in a language that works for them. And that's another way of connecting, another way of having affinity, of building bridges between people, of letting people know that from a relationships point of view, as part of our big wellbeing wheel, that we can reach out and connect with each other. So we've enjoyed having this time, this opportunity to speak with you today. We hope you've got some value out of this presentation, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon. We're going to do another workshop shortly on how we use this material in an organisation and how we move as organisations into an agile space. So do a bit of a stock take for yourself. Think about what are the areas that you can equip yourself with, that you need to put some effort into, how these areas interact with each other, and how, if you put your energy management to the fore, how that's going to help you manage the rest of your well-being. If you have any questions or you'd like more information on any of these areas at all, or you'd like some assistance personally or in your workplace, please don't hesitate to contact Wayne or myself on the website that's been located there for you. Thanks very much for listening, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, guys. See you during the next webinar.